Hey everyone, welcome back to Highly Unlikely with Josh and Jenaye. We are in our family values series and we're tackling a new value today of live to give. And we're so excited to unpack it and dive deep and even just tell you a story or two.
Yes, so we're covering our core values or family values as we call them, which is part of our church, but ultimately I think everybody can live by them in some way. Yeah. And so we're going to hit live to give, but Jenaye is being responsible as she always is and pulled a card for us.
It's a good question. I'm excited about this.
Here we go.
And I kind of want to add to it, but what is your favorite restaurant? And I would say, what are your favorite 3 restaurants? That's what I would say. Number 1, 2, 3.
I'm not a foodie.
Oh, golly, you aren't.
Like when we travel, I just want to go to Chipotle.
I mean, but that's because we don't have it. Like you want to experience it because we don't have it.
So I don't know if this is my favorite, but we were in Fargo and we discovered a new place called Crisp and Green.
Crisp and Green. Yep. Good memory.
And they have like salads.
It's pretty much like healthy stuff, like huge salads and like
healthy
acai bowls and maybe smoothie bowls.
And you know the best part? It's right next door to Chipotle.
It is.
I love Chick-fil-A too.
Yeah. But before we had Chick-fil-A here, that would be like, that's where we go.
Yeah.
But yeah, that place, we went on an anniversary trip and we ate there like 2 or 3 times in like a matter of a day or 2.
Yeah, it's good. It's healthy. It's fresh.
Yeah. So if you have a Crisp and Green, that would probably be our favorite if there was one here.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Give me your
I
faves.
mean, favorite, like, I love Noodle Zip.
We do love Noodle Zip.
I have heard that Itai is good too, but we just haven't gone there often. But I mean, Chara's, oh no, I have a lot of favorites. But like, I think, where do we go on date night? Chara's, very consistently.
Yep.
Noodle Zip sometimes. And I love that those are like more like small local places here. But we could do our favorite chain restaurants, As you can tell, food is an experience for me.
It is. The only time food was ever like an experience for me is when I went to Israel and they had all Mediterranean food. And I was like, feed me all the things all day. And they had hummus that was like fresh. I don't even like hummus.
He came back and I'm like, you ate things there. And I wasn't with him.
Because apparently
you don't even eat here.
Things that are created, put in a box, then shipped to North Dakota don't taste the same as when you get them straight off the,
So that's incredibly true.
They don't say hummus in Israel. They say hummus.
Hummus.
And it's so good.
Josh essentially loves any combination of chicken and rice. And for the first couple years of our marriage, I think most dishes we ate was some form of chicken and rice.
It's a great bachelor food.
It is a great bachelor food.
But this is not about what kind of food we want to get. This is about how we want to live to give. Live to give.
What does live to give even mean?
So live to give can sound like a money thing, but it's not. Live to give is being somebody who gives.
Value and concept for life.
It is being somebody who gives. It just lives a generous life, really, and giving of your time, giving of your talent, giving of your energy, just living out of the overflow of your treasure. Yeah, and your treasure.
Talent and treasure.
Just living a generous life, and so. Jenaye is a very generous person in how she gives her time. If she commits to something, she will be there. Financially, she wants to help people out as much as possible. I'm more selfish than her, and I have to work to live to give at times.
I don't even know if it's selfish. I think you like security. Being generous in those avenues doesn't seem as secure.
Yeah. And that's something that came out in preparation for marriage. We talk about the different motivators that people have, especially around money. And sometimes it's security. They want money for security, sometimes for influence. And for me, it's a security thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I just love to bless people.
Yeah. We teach our church all the time that we want to be contributors, not consumers.
Yeah. That's kind of the tagline under Live to Give, is to be a contributor in God's kingdom and from your life, and not just a consumer or just take and stuff. But that whatever, I think it was John Lindell at James River, Pastor John Lindell at James River. There was a message he did on just like everything you have is a gift from God. And that's why we view it through the lens of live to give. So God has given you the talents you have. He designed you and fashioned you that way. So if he's given you that, it's your job to let it be flowing out of you. And he did this beautiful picture of someone. He had this huge bucket of corn. I think you might have done it, but with your own hands. But he brought someone up and just showed, like, when your hands are open, what falls into your hands can slide right out of them. When your hands are fisted and closed, nothing can even get in to allow it to flow through. So when we maybe have what we have and we hold tightly and we're like, it's mine to decide, or it's my time, it's my talent, it's my money. It caps like how God can use it to flow through you. And there's a principle in Scripture that says, if you are faithful with the little that I give, then you will get increasing responsibility, and you proves that you'll be faithful with much.
Yeah.
And that could be, talent and even time. I feel like God can help you to capitalize on your time.
Yeah, and faithfulness. So that's kind of what it's all about, because we look at the word faithfulness, and even in the Bible, Jesus taught, hey, a master went away and he left behind for those that served him a different number, a certain amounts of money, right?
5, 2, and 1.
Yeah, and so he leaves behind certain amounts of money, or what's called talents for them, and we find the definition of faithfulness in this story, because one guy thought faithfulness was to literally sit on what he had and to not lose it. The others took it and did something with what they were given, and that was being a good steward. That was being faithfulness. And so I think living to give primarily is about realizing that I am a steward of everything that's in my life, not an owner.
Yep.
That there's a master, of this kingdom, and there's a master of this world, and it's all his. I am just a steward of it. So whether it's
I think of you.
Yeah.
Like, God gave me you.
Yeah, your
Not
spouse.
for me to control you, but
Right.
to steward my relationship with you, to steward our emotional health and our connection. Our kids were given to us by God to steward their lives, not to control their lives. Man, that's a temptation, though, in both of those areas. And even like our home, we are private people. We are vulnerable, but like we live kind of in, we call it fake country, but everyone has like an acre or so, you're spread out. You like your space.
All the wannabe cowboys.
Yeah, you like your privacy. But even our house it's been given to us to bless other people and to create an atmosphere in our home and welcome people in. And we can get real comfortable in what we've been given. But I don't think there's nowhere in Scripture that says get real comfortable in what I've given you and I'm going to give you more to be responsible with. You just don't find that. And so this value, as we embody it, I just think it's not this like, oh God, if I do this, I can trick you into giving me more of XYZ. And he sees your heart. That's what he actually judges, is your heart. And so we just need that pure heart of, God, I just want to steward whatever you give me so well, to where how I steward it actually brings attention to your name, Jesus, and like creates conversation around the why of how I steward things. Or we have a dream. I mean, we talk about the one podcast where we talk about being future-minded. Man, you can be future-minded in this, of dreaming of how you want to use what you've been given. I think you have a passion for writing. I mean, you haven't written a book yet, but I believe it's in your future. And I think once you had said, man, what if like proceeds from my book went to pay for MLC students to come here? And we have a dream of fully paying for someone's adoption and just like footing the bill and being like, it's done. Just go get that kid, And that is the most fulfilling, peaceful, fun life, where you take what you've been given and your passions and your talents and how you allocate your time and hold it loosely and just giving it away.
Yeah, and I really think it's important, because I think the most generous people are the most joyful people. And that's not always who has the most, like who consumes the most. It's who's the most generous. And I think the measuring rod, we can look at our lives and just say, out of everything that I have, how have I used it to contribute and to add value to other people's lives versus how have I used it just to consume, And that doesn't mean God doesn't at times allow things into our lives for our pleasure or for our comfort, Sure, he does that. But really, when we look at everything God has given, how have I allowed those things to be a blessing to other people rather than just for my own consumption and for my own happiness, which is really, really easy to do.
No, definitely.
So
I totally had a thought and I lost it.
it's okay. It's okay. I think I think about some of the people in this room right now that you can't see on camera or you can't hear, and they've given hours and hours and hours to allow us to even be able to do this. And nobody will ever, I mean, we shout them out once in a while, but
We do. We try to because you guys matter.
yeah, but nobody even knows really like that maybe what their face looks like or who they are, but they're here and they're doing it. And that to me is an example of what it means to live to give. You know, you don't always got to get the glory.
Exactly. And yeah, and I think the concept of live to give, you might think, oh, I have to give of all these things in this specific way all the time my whole life. And I feel like we've had to lean in and discern in what seasons, what do we have to give? And what do we have to be generous with? When we were paying off debt, we did not have the bandwidth to be outrageously generous because we had a goal that now that we've conquered that goal, we can be. And it's fun. Also, but when we were paying off debt, we were a little bit more free with our time to give. I think of meal trains for friends. I would like do all this meal prep and I'd be like, here's 2 meals and breakfast and snacks because I had the time. Our close friends just had a baby not too long ago and I was like, all right, what do you guys want for takeout? Because I can do that. We weren't doing takeout, paying off debt.
Yep.
But I have less time now than I did then, but my finances are in better order. And so I could bless them in that way. And just, I think of the people in our lives that maybe we're like a young adult and we're like, I can bless you with my time. That's either like helping with your kids or, you know, we threw a baby shower for a friend at our home. And I said, hey, I know you all live in apartments. Like, use my house. Like, I want it filled with people. Yeah. And I don't have the time to plan this. Baby showers are next level compared to when we had babies. It was like
back in our day.
Kind of, I was like, oh wow, like it has an aesthetic, it has a mood board, you know, where it's like mine is just like, oh, you're having a boy, it's blue. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I just said, hey, I don't have the time to plan all that and get all the stuff, but I can give you, I have the finances, and so I can give you guys the money so you don't have to feel that burden, and I can give you the space so you don't have to like clean, you know. And so just try to discern in what season what you're able to give and not get caught in like a guilt trap.
Yeah, that's really good.
You know?
I was thinking about one theologian, and I can't remember how the quote goes, but it's like, it's not, you don't know the goodness of God when the blessing of God gets to you. You start to realize the goodness of God when his blessing works through you. And you're in a position where God is allowing you. And people believe this one myth all the time. If I had more, I would give more. Right?
Which I will just remind you that money and marriage are magnifiers. So if you are greedy and not generous, having more money will only magnify that you are not generous.
And
and we have seen it play out.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's where it's like, no, you got to be faithful with what little you have. And then God says, oh, okay, I guess I can trust them with more. And they're going to continue to not be a consumer, but a contributor. They're going to continue to let it flow through them.
Which I think is interesting because I talked about us paying off debt and I said that we weren't generous, but then we went back because I had said that, like, we haven't been generous. And you went back and calculated, you're like, Jenaye, we still were giving away and being generous with 15% of our income, you know? And it's like, oh, okay. And that's where
you might say, oh, 15%, but it's like we were not eating out. We were like living off cash envelopes. Like we were being very disciplined and went back and realized, no, we were still generous in that season, you know?
Yeah. And just, how it looks different.
Yeah. And it's not just a money thing. It's, you know, it's the people. I have friends who are like, I had a guy message me this week and he goes, hey, I heard that you got a basketball hoop that you're going to set up and I need you to let me know the time because I need to come over and help you with it, you know, and just very generous he came and helped me plant my tree rows, like just constantly like, I want to be a part of what you need help with and that style of generosity. And I think you have to look at, you know, how are you wired? Right. And I love to give my talent to people, you know.
I was going to say, you're gifted at coaching. I think you've really understood that, like coaching and leadership and things, and you've given that very freely to people. I think even as a church, like if churches come to us and are like, hey, can we learn from you in this way? It's not like, no. Like, and we follow churches, or maybe that's your own business. Like if a competitor, I used air quotes, like came and you wouldn't be generous with resources or like, yeah, this is how we did it because you view it as competition. I just saw a quote, if you're in ministry, it's Carrie Newhoff, and he said, your competition is not the church down the street.
Yeah.
It is the beach on a sunny day.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I love that because it's not.
Yeah.
We are all on the same team. But even that's very countercultural to like be generous. Even, I'm not saying like things that maybe, I don't know, like an original idea that you're like, yes, please copyright me. But there is a church. You just went to a conference. They literally say, this is our form for this. You can actually just wipe our brand or our like logo off of it, plant yours on it and use it. That's okay.
Yeah.
And just this open-handedness of like, we have put the work in and we can help you work smarter and not harder.
Right. And where did this mindset come from that like says I need to get my fair shake for everything that I give, or I need paid for everything that I do? And that so easily gets into the church of, and man, I'm telling you, when you require something of others for what you give, there's something that is lost in that in your own heart and in a reward in God's kingdom versus just giving freely. I mean,
I think there's also like a family and team concept because it's like there's God's family, okay? And I think also it's a little bit different than like when I worked at the hospital in the workspace in that way, but I think of like our own family. And sometimes we reward with like a nickel. Our kids are young enough where it's like, I'll give you a nickel if blah, 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 you know, if this. And I remember once Avery's like, Mom, I did this, so now I get $1.
Yeah.
And I said, I was like, you are on the Shaldell team. So you're just playing your part. Like you can choose to sit on the bench, but sitting on the bench doesn't have privileges because you are a part of this team. This is just your part. And you don't get to just abdicate your responsibility or say, I will only do it if you compensate me.
Right.
Crap is that?
Right.
That's how I felt inside. I was like, no. But I think, like you said, that can get into the family mindset of like, well, I did this.
Right.
So.
Right. And that's where it's like, it's live to give. It's not pick your moment. It's just live a life that at every moment when you see an opportunity, you're saying, how can I serve? How can I be a part of what God is doing? How can I give? How can I take all the blessing? Honestly, if you're listening to this podcast, no matter what your current life situation is, you're blessed. Like, and not like you're in the top like 1% or 3%. I can't remember what the number is.
Isn't it just if you live in America?
Yeah.
You're already in the top, like very small percentage.
Across the world, you're in the top wealth bracket compared to the entire world. Like you have been entrusted with things that you can invest in the lives of other people around you. It's just being intentional about that and recognizing those opportunities. And yeah, it's so easy to lose it. But
yeah.
I think we've experienced this in our lives, but I think there's another human who has lived this.
Yeah.
And I've seen them, like they're the most generous person when it comes to like giving encouragement.
Right.
I've received so many cards from this person of just like appreciation, super generous with their time. If somebody's hurting or in need or needs a lift somewhere, they drop everything and go help that person.
Yeah.
I saw this person fill out like we had...
Let's just...
Should we just bring him over?
Yeah, he's in the room. So, Mitch.
Yeah, why don't you...
Grab that great chair and come on over.
Why don't you grab that chair?
You guys, you got to go to the YouTube and watch if you're not, because he's completely shocked right now.
Mitch is our sound tech, but he's also like one of the most...
He's like, is the formal word audio engineer, which now he's probably like, oh no, where's the mic? Yeah, you go to the mic there. Here, you come share with me, babe.
Welcome, Mitch, to the podcast, everyone.
I had zero anticipation of you describing me right
That's
now.
what we love.
Thanks, Remy, for hopping over there.
Oh, this is so fun. We were so excited to surprise you.
Oh my gosh.
When we were planning for Live to Give, we thought of you. And we're like, oh, we got to just talk to Mitch about this. And we see it in so many areas of your life. But I know the one area marked in both of our lives was we did the Rise campaign. And there was a little bookmark that, sorry, I don't know. Is the sound okay, Remy? Yeah. We did this little bookmark where someone could mark off $20 at a time to give $2,020. And Josh, I mean, you were the one that experienced it, but I know he came home, he's like, Jenaye, I was just either standing in the office or something, and you walked up to him kind of after all the fanfare of this big initiative and what we were doing had died down, and you hand him that bookmark that at $20 increments you just kept plugging away. And I know that just like really marked Josh of like, man, like the faithfulness, and just you take that axe and you're hitting that same log every day. So we see that in your life, but we see that in your gifts. You are very talented. Is the word audio engineer? Would that be it?
Yes.
Like with sound and audio, and you give it so freely. I just think of there was like a ministry at the church, and you gave your nights to be doing that for them. And there was a homeless man at the church one night, and I was here and I didn't really know what to do. And you're like, I'll give you a ride to ministry at the margin. But we just wanted to talk to you about maybe what that journey of just, it seems like you hold things very open-handed, but have resolved to be very faithful. And what was your journey were you just always this way? Or, I mean, like, what are you wondering about it?
No, that's
like,
right.
how is your journey to living out a very generous and live to give life?
Great question. I mean, just off the top of my head, I think growing up, my parents modeled a lot of that. I felt like being taught to like even give in kids ministry in the church I grew up in. I guess I don't know how that manifested as an adult then, but I think it's just a subconscious thing. But a part of that a huge driving factor in my life too is like meaning and purpose. And if I feel that somewhere, like at Evangel, it's really easy for me to buy in. And I think it's that buy-in, and that's kind of the source for me that really drives, I guess, a lot of the desire to just give and without it feeling like giving. Kind of like what you guys touched on too, with like, it doesn't really feel like, it doesn't feel like giving. It doesn't hurt.
Right.
It really, you find that on the other side of that, it's way more joyful to give than to receive in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I feel like Josh said, you're even just generous in your words and affirmation and encouraging people. This maybe is a weird question, but we talk about boundaries and stuff on this podcast. And have you ever felt like having boundaries as a person and living this value of live to give or a generous life have ever kind of come into competition with each other? Or I think before I've said, Mitch, I don't want to take advantage of you. I feel like you just always say yes. Yeah. Or has that ever come up to challenge, or do you feel like you've just naturally had a heart to serve and it doesn't deplete you?
I think it can deplete a little bit if you're not careful with like burnout, for sure. But again, if it's a source of joy for you, it doesn't feel like work. It doesn't feel like burnout. It's super easy to just give and give and give without it feeling like burnout. I think that is also important to be clear with whoever you're serving or whoever you're under, to like, hey, these are my boundaries and this is where I need to be. And I'm kind of overextending that. And it's also a little bit different being married now than when I was single and interning.
Have you been married a year?
Just over a year.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yes.
How has that played out in marriage?
This has been even a recent journey. I feel like I've been learning and stewarding that well. Even stepping away from, like, literally, I think this week, stepping away from my freelance stuff just to focus. And Ivy had a conversation with me. Ivy is my wife, who's also on staff here, thankfully.
Yeah, she's amazing.
So stepping away from that to steward and lead my family well, my family being, one person right now, but is something I felt a conviction about, and something that, and it helps, I think, that she's employed here too. And she understands that this role, production, worship, those two roles specifically are like very driven by other ministries. So any other ministry that includes those, we're just naturally there. But not just me, but production, Paul, Jenna, all the team members that are part of production really have that heart to just serve and serve and serve and be invisible, because we get joy out of that serving and out of God getting the glory for that. And
it's funny that you say invisible, but everyone would notice if you just weren't there and didn't do what you did. Like, everyone would notice. in what we do, I really think. I love that concept of, in your marriage, you had a conversation, but a conviction of really you're loving and serving your wife with your time by setting something aside, maybe for a season or whatever that looks like that you're passionate about and love, so you have more time to allocate with her. I think that's such a beautiful example.
Did that even answer your question? I'm sorry, I don't even
No,
remember.
you're doing great, Mitch. You had zero idea that we were doing this.
No
You're doing
problem.
wonderful.
Okay.
I honestly, I want to ask, like, how much of your generosity, like in moments where you're like, I'm going to write that card or I'm going to show up to that thing, like how much of it is like intentionality of like, I need to do this, and how much of it just kind of like, are there areas where in order to be generous and to live to give, you have to plan for it? Or does most of it just kind of flow out of who you are? You know, like you get an idea and you just run with it.
Yeah.
Because I think for some people, they're like, man, I'm not naturally that way. Maybe you're naturally that way.
I feel like it is a fairly natural response for me. And again, I think this is really nice for maybe an encouragement to anyone listening that doesn't feel like they hear the voice of the Lord. This is encouraging for me too, because I think it's just confirmation that like the voice of the Lord doesn't have to be this gigantic sound, but sometimes it is just this like, there have been moments where I'm like, I need to write this letter to Pastor Josh right now or whoever, like I just need to write this and express to them whatever it is, because I think to me that communicates like the appreciation, and everyone knows what it feels like to be appreciated for something and how great that feels. Like, why would I not want to make people feel like that?
Yeah. So for people who have been the recipient of generosity, as somebody who's very generous in the way that you live, what are the best ways that when you've been generous to somebody, that they've said thank you? Because I think sometimes we have a hard time receiving generosity.
Totally.
And it's kind of a North Dakota thing too, where it's like, man, I'm uncomfortable with people being this nice or this kind, or I don't know how to respond. And what are ways that people can respond to generosity that are life-giving for the person who is generous? You know, like I think some people, I would say that a wrong response would be, I'm going to pay you back eventually. Like, no, you need to just receive it, you know?
Which is totally my reaction. I'm like, oh, I totally owe you something right now. And I don't know, that's weird as someone who, like, I love encouraging people and I love just giving in that way, but that's my knee-jerk reaction too, for sure, for some reason.
How would you encourage people to respond to somebody being generous towards them?
Right off the bat, I think just literally just a heartfelt like thank you. That means a lot. Like expressing what that meant to you. But I think a lot of that would also bleed into your love language and how that person actually receives love. If sounds really weird again, going off of what we just said, but if that is for some reason like a gift, depending on what they gave you, if it was encouragement and appropriate to give a gift back or whatever. But more often than not, I think it needs to be a culture that's built up of like, no, this is just the way we do things. We encourage each other. We call things out. Yeah. And then when you do see something that you appreciate or that you appreciate in someone, like just always be calling that out and then always be expressing to that person what that meant to you.
Right. Yeah. We had someone once that was, I don't know what they were trying to do, but they wanted to bless us in some way. I feel like it was maybe financial. I don't know what it was. Maybe give us something. And we were like, no. And they said, don't steal my blessing. Yeah. Like, I feel like I'm supposed to bless you right now. And by you being like, no. And you just think like, I'm inconveniencing you, or like, no, I'll pay you back. Like, you're actually stealing the opportunity for them to like hear from the Lord and execute that and kind of making it about yourself rather than just letting them. And so now that's like a thing, like, don't steal their blessing. Like, let them, if they feel led to do it, say thank you. And I feel like my best friend taught me this in regards to words, where it's very funny. We had to do a day in a wheelchair so we could have empathy and understanding to those who we would work with.
Not here at Evangel. This was
this was when I was going to PT school, just for context. So when we worked with patients, we had a bit more empathy. And honestly, I don't use a handicap stall unless that's the last resort, because I did a day in a wheelchair. It's just changed your perspective, but she was wheeling me back and I was in the wheelchair. She goes, oh, Jenaye, I just love your hair. And I said, oh, I love yours too. And she said, no, you don't. You just said that because I said it. Just say thank you. And I was like, you're right. I mean, I don't not like your hair, but I just said it kind of out of nervousness, and we need to get comfortable making sure what we say and affirm or encourage is sincere and not just like a reaction.
Oh, totally.
Wow.
I think that's a huge part too, is making sure it's sincere, not just a, hey, good job, but like we live in a culture, I feel like everyone, everywhere, that you're just quick to just, oh, I like your hair, that exact example, but just being sure that whatever you say is always like, no, you mean that. Like if you're saying that, there should be a reason why you're saying that.
Right.
I think sometimes by our reaction, we actually shut down people's generosity.
Yeah.
Because if you give somebody a compliment and they give you a reaction like that, or they're like, yeah, whatever, you're not going to compliment them again, because it wasn't received. I've said that to you, I think, like.
It's usually when he's like, Jenaye, you're so beautiful. And I'm like, okay, no.
She's like, no, your typical response is, thanks. Like, it's just kind of your go-to. And I'm like, don't just receive it.
So I've been working on it.
You have
I'll
been.
be like, thank you, babe.
But
and
I think we can shut
painful,
down,
but
we can almost make people feel bad for being generous because we take it with insincerity,
yeah.
when it really was sincere.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to hear, Mitch, when you did the Rise campaign, like the $20 at a time, you were like an intern, right? I think that was the thing. Like, what was that journey like? What kind of self-discipline did it have to take? Like, what maybe sacrifices did it have to take for you to just plug away at that?
That was the poorest moment of my life, like poorest season of my life. And it's really
like
funny.
Financially speaking?
Yes,
Wow.
financially speaking. And it's really hilarious looking back because my friend's wife worked at Bread Poets and gave me a loaf of bread for free. And I was like hyped to receive this loaf of bread because it kind of hit me. I was like, wow, I'm poor. Hyped to receive this loaf of bread, which was great. I still would appreciate that. But,
right, yeah. The impact was a bit different based on your season of life. Yeah.
For sure. The discipline, I think, again, just the buy-in was the motivating factor, and like it just made everything worth it. Sacrifices, I don't know that it felt like sacrifice. I think it was just this weird, like I decided I was going to do it,
right,
and didn't really think anything of it, and would just plug away at it.
Yeah.
One check mark at a time, and talk about the provision of God, like for real. Like that was the first year I'd moved out of my parents' house too, so it was like paying rent for the first time, all those things. There was zero reason for me to like have survived off of what I was making at that time too. So I think less like of my motivating factors and just having a confidence in God's provision and God's not just financial blessing, obviously, but just comfort and peace. Because like I wasn't worrying about anything necessarily during that time. I just knew it was going to be okay. And maybe that was me being a little naive, but...
Well, but it doesn't sound like you were spending your money foolishly in other ways. Like you were meeting your basic needs and then felt led also to give this. It wasn't like, I'm spending $20 at Joy House every week.
I mean, I am a sucker for coffee. I'm sure there was a bit of that going, a good chunk of my budget going to that for sure. But
that is too funny.
It's funny to hear you tell the story because I'm the one that made the appeal to the church for that so that we could do what we felt like the vision God had given us was. And my reaction is, as an intern who's super broke, like, no, Mitch, don't give that much. Like, somebody else will, cover your 2020 gift for you. But that is exactly what we talked about of undercutting what God produced in you through that commitment and just allowing you to be generous and not.
I think there's a good parallel too to like our relationship with God in that. And when we talk about like being afraid of receiving God's grace, the concept of a gift, like you don't give back a gift. Like if you got something for someone genuinely hyped about like, oh, they're going to love this. I got this thinking of them. You give it to them. They're like, oh no, I can't take this. I can't accept that. Kind of what we do with God's grace and forgiveness too, I feel, or can do.
Seriously.
Yeah. So the same concepts bleed over into just generosity in our lives too.
Right. That's so good.
Your story and even your heart makes me think of in Mark 12 when Jesus gives a parable about the widow's offering. And he says, Jesus sat near the collection box in the temple and watched as the crowds dropped in their money. And I don't know what teaching we had heard that the dropping of the money, it would make like a loud clanging
sound.
Thank you.
Clanging cymbal.
And then I snorted. I'm sorry.
There's lots of great nonverbals in this podcast. If you are
listening,
you should go back to the YouTube.
Yeah, watch on YouTube. Okay, so dropping it in could be of show too, but many rich people put in large amounts, so it was very loud. I didn't say that. I added that. I'm saying it would have been loud. Then a poor widow came and dropped in 2 small coins. Jesus called his disciples to him and said, I tell you the truth. This poor widow has given more than all the others who are making contributions, for they gave a tiny part of their surplus. But she, poor as she is, has given everything she had to live on. And yes, that was in the context of money, but thinking of, your time that you can give, like in seasons that you maybe have a surplus of time compared to seasons you have maybe surplus of abilities. Does that make sense? Like my abilities, I think were enhanced in college because I also had the time to give of my abilities. But now it's a different season. But that story in scripture just made me think of you where like you're like, that was the poorest season of my life. But out of discipline and self-control and the Lord enabling you, and empowering you through that it was a sacrifice because you had to be intentional.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just like, oh, I have this much left over all the time and whatever, not a big deal. Who was it, Corey Ten Boom? Did you tell that story on the podcast? Who told the story of someone writing a check to her?
It was Mother Teresa.
Oh, Mother Teresa. Sorry.
Yeah, and basically, I don't remember all the details. The story goes that Mother Teresa was on a plane. I can't remember if we told this on the podcast or not, but
well, if not, we'll tell it again.
And she was sat next to a young businessman, and he heard all about what she was doing in India and wanted to contribute to it, and so he handed her a check for like $200,000, and she thanked him genuinely for it, and his response was, "It's no sweat off my back,"
like,
basically,
no big deal.
Like it's no big deal, and she handed the check back to him, and basically said,
Wasn't it something along like, no, I want people to give that like care and it
I
is
want
a
it to
sacrifice.
matter.
Like it mattered to them that they're giving.
I don't want it to be flippant or out of compulsion, like, and because I can't remember the whole story, but then the young man wrote a new check and it was like for $1 million.
He sat and kind of contemplated it.
Yeah,
and
what she
then
had
from
said.
contemplating it, he's like, no, now this matters. Like
Or he's
this
like,
is a
and
big
trust
deal.
me, Mother Teresa, this hurts.
Yeah. And I just think of, to some it can be, this amount. It's not it's about the heart and what stewardship did it take to be able to give of either your time or the gifts placed within you, or your treasure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think of what Paul wrote to Timothy, and he said, set an example for the believers in your love and your faith and your purity, in the things that you do. And I think I love to celebrate people that are like ahead of their time. I'm doing air quotes now, but ahead of their time in the way that they live out an aspect of the kingdom. And I think when it comes to generosity with your time, generosity in caring for people, generosity in encouragement, generosity financially, Mitch is somebody that everybody should aspire to be like and to live in the way that he lives. And there's been times where we were going to record this podcast and I've walked in 45 minutes late, because I had a different meeting or something went wrong. And I've never got a sense of like indignation or entitlement or frustration. And it's always just like, hey, I'm here to serve, and I'm here to be a part, to contribute, not to consume, and so we love that about you. And I know it's not just you. I know Ivy embodies that too. And so it's almost the joke around here. Like when a need gets filled, it's like, oh, of course Mitch would do that. Of course they would take care of that. And so thanks for being a leading example of what it means to live to give and to be a contributor.
Yeah.
You are an ideal team player.
Right.
That's for sure.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this was a fun conversation.
It was. Surprise.
A fun surprise conversation.
I know, which in between recordings, Mitch just ran to the bathroom and we plotted our plan.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Never leave the room between sessions.
I know, right?
There we go.
So if the sound on this episode is horrible, Remy's doing his best running everything back there.
He's doing so great.
It's because what Mitch had to say was more important than what it sounded like.
So true. Oh, well, thank you guys for listening and tuning in. You can be sure to subscribe to the podcast and share and rate and review it. And we're excited to see you next time.